Hello?
Hey, George, you're here. I'm just muted for a minute.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'll call to order the meeting of the Souhegan Cooperative School Board on Monday, March 23rd, 2020. First, before we begin, I have something I'd like to read. As the ex officio chair of this meeting, I've determined that the potential health issues associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, the governor's declared state of emergency in New Hampshire due to COVID-19, and the public health authority's recommendations for social distancing, quarantine, and self-isolation, this meeting constitutes an emergency pursuant to RSA 91A2, subsection 3B, in that immediate action is imperative and the physical presence of a quorum is not reasonably practical, and the organization needs to conduct its regular meeting to continue to move the business of the organization forward during this pandemic. As a result, members of the public body may participate by phone as well as through Zoom and Facebook Live, and a quorum need not be present in the location for which this meeting was noticed. Any actions taken must be by roll call vote. For the record, this meeting has been properly noticed for more than 24 hours, and the public may attend the meeting at the notice location of the Brick School at 1 School Street, where the meeting will be audible to the public. So first, I'm going to take a roll call of all of the board members that are present. George Torres.
Here.
Amy Facey.
Here.
Stephanie Grund.
Here.
Steve Coughlin.
Here.
Laura Taylor.
Here.
And Dave Chen.
Here.
And Pim Gronstra.
Here.
Very good. All right. Our first order of business is to elect a chair of the school board. So the way this process will work is I will take all nominations from the board, and however many people are nominated, I'll keep a list. It doesn't require a second. If you want to nominate someone, you can just tell me you'd like to nominate them. After I receive a list of all nominations, I will close nominations and we will vote. And if there is a clear winner, I will declare that person the chair. If there's not, we'll have a secondary vote if needed. So, are there any nominations for chair of the Souhegan Cooperative School Board?
I'd like to nominate Pim Gronstra.
Amy Facey nominates Pim Gronstra. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I declare nominations closed. Pim Gronstra, would you be willing to serve in that role if elected?
If elected, sure.
Okay. All right. We'll take a roll call vote to determine if Pim is the chair of the Souhegan Cooperative School Board. Amy Facey.
Yes.
Stephanie Grund.
Yes.
Steve Coughlin.
Yes.
George Torres.
Yes.
Dave Chen.
Yes.
Laura Taylor.
Yes.
And Pim Gronstra.
Can I abstain?
You can.
Yes.
Okay. The motion carries 7-0, and I'll turn the meeting over to Pim. And Pim, I've got a list of other things we need to take care of as part of the organizational meeting. Would you like me to list those for you as we go through them?
Yes, please.
Okay. First is election of a vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Amy Facey for vice chair of the Souhegan Cooperative School Board.
I don't know if I can raise my hand.
Yeah, Dave.
I'd like to nominate Laura Taylor as vice chair.
Any other nominations?
Can you hear me?
Who?
Adam?
I can hear you, but I'm no longer running the meeting. So Pim is running the meeting now, and he can hear you.
Oh.
So we have two nominations, Amy Facey and Laura Taylor. Any other nominations? Hearing none? Adam, can I ask a question? What's the best way to go about this? Do we do a roll call or we do one person at a time and go from there?
Yes.
Well, given that each board member gets one vote and we have to do a roll call anyway, you can have each board member specify who they vote for vice chair.
Okay, I'll do a roll call. I see Stephanie up first, so I'll ask Stephanie to run.
Laura?
Okay. Steve Coughlin? Can't hear you, Steve.
Amy Pacey.
Okay. Dave Chen?
Laura Taylor.
George Torres?
Amy Facey.
Laura?
Myself.
Who am I missing? Besides me?
Amy.
You.
Amy.
Oh, Amy, of course. Yeah. Sorry. Amy?
I'll go for Amy.
And as a tiebreaker, I'm gonna go for Amy as well.
All right, next is secretary of the board.
I have nominations for secretary.
I'll nominate Stephanie Grund.
Any other nominations for secretary of the Souhegan Cooperative School Board? Hearing none. Do a roll call vote. Amy?
Stephanie?
Steve?
Stephanie.
Okay. Stephanie?
Stephanie. Myself.
Laura?
Stephanie.
Dave?
Stephanie.
George?
Stephanie.
And myself, Stephanie. That's everybody, right? Okay. Stephanie, you get to be secretary 7-0.
Stephanie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your video right now, you look like Amy Klobuchar. I'm voting for Amy Klobuchar.
Hopefully that's a good thing.
Oh, it is.
All right, next is to appoint a school district treasurer effective July 1st, 2020. This is not a board member. So the school district treasurer, because we're a cooperative school district, is not an elected position like it is for Amherst or Mount Vernon school districts. The current school district treasurer has been with us for a number of years and I believe is interested in continuing to serve. But that would need to be not someone who's nominated by the school board with a duly with a second and then voted on as a yes or no vote by the school board.
Nominations then for school district clerk?
Treasurer.
Sorry, treasurer?
Can I ask why that isn't CJ Butler?
It's current.
So
You can nominate her if you like.
I would like to, well, I don't know if she would accept, but she's not here to.
Well, I know somebody who might know, so, but go ahead and nominate.
I'd like to
Yeah, and
I would like to nominate CJ Butler for Souhegan School District Treasurer.
Second.
She won't accept that.
I will second the motion. Okay, and any other nominations? Hearing none. Do a roll call vote. Dave,
Chen, yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Steve? I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Steve, we really want to hear what you say.
I abstain. I abstain.
Abstain? Okay.
Howard,
Yeah. And I say yes as well. So 601 favor of CJ Butler to be the district treasurer.
All right, next is the same process to appoint a school district clerk, although the only difference is that is effective immediately.
Okay.
School district clerk.
And our current clerk is
Christine.
Christine.
Christine Jansen.
I'll nominate Christine Jansen.
Second.
Second by Amy Casey. Any other nominations? Hearing none. Roll call. Day 10,
Chen, yes.
Laura Taylor,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Steve Coffin,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So 7-0 for Christine Jansen. Congratulations to her.
All right, now there are several board appointed positions for various committees. And some require one, some require two people, and generally done by consensus of the board, but can require a vote if there's any contentious things there. And by the way, I'm following along in our Trello board. There's a card for the organizational meeting. So for those following along at home or board members trying to keep up with where I am, there's a Trello card there. So the first is for the Advisory Finance Committee, liaison from the board, one person.
Is anybody interested in this position?
I can do that one.
I'll do it.
Okay, sorry. Is that Amy, you said you were interested? George, you said also you were interested?
I do it.
Amy can do it if she so chooses.
All right.
No, I didn't say yes to that.
No, Stephanie said. And sorry, George, what did you say?
I defer.
Okay. In that case, seeing as Stephanie's raising her hand the highest, she can be the representative to the Finance Advisory Committee.
Can I ask a question, Adam? There has always been two in the past. I mean, I've served on the board, I've served on the finance committee. There's always been two in the past. Is there a reason why we only have one? No.
The last 2 years, the board had only appointed one, but there's nothing preventing you from having two. As long as there's not a quorum of the board present at a meeting, there's nothing wrong with that. You certainly can appoint two if you'd like.
Maybe one as an alternate. Does that work?
Sure.
Whatever. Doesn't matter to me.
It's always been two, as long as I remember, and I was served on it on both sides of it too. So I don't know why they're. It was helpful, I think.
So if George, if you're still interested, you can certainly be the second.
I will humbly accept.
Perfect.
All right. Next is the Athletic Liaison Committee, 2 members.
Anybody wants to be the athletic liaison?
I'll do that.
Dave?
I'll also do the finance committee too.
Oh, we already have 2 members.
Oh, who are they?
George and Stephanie.
Oh, okay, fine.
So,
Good.
all right, so Dave is on the athletic liaison. Anybody else have an interest? If not, I'm happy to continue on with that as well. No others? Okay.
So it's Pim and George, is that what it was?
Oh, and Dave.
Dave.
Oh, Pim and Dave, I'm sorry.
Correct.
CIP Committee, the Capital Improvement Plan Committee for Amherst, 1 member. I believe it was Steve Coughlin the last number of years.
Anybody have an interest?
I'm willing to keep doing it.
Okay. Does anybody have a dying need to get on that committee? I see a lot of closed mouths.
I'm not volunteering. I just want to ask a question. As we go on here, one of the goals of the SAU was that we start working as a single board, as an SAU is a single board, and therefore, basically, we would have one from each of the. And it seems to me there's a contradiction here. And the contradiction is that if you want to serve as one board, they should be prepared to do everything for the SAU, versus having one for each of the boards and having different answers come up. You know what I'm saying? It just feels to me like we will not be working as one board.
Are you referring to the CIP committee in particular?
Yes.
So I'll say that the town picks who they want to have on that committee. They ask for a representative from the Souhegan School Board, the Amherst School Board, and from the SAU. So last year it was me, Terry Beam, and Michelle. And we worked very well together. We acted in a unified way. Michelle can agree with that, I hope.
Okay, so Steve then for CIP committee.
All right. Next is Community Council, 1 member.
I'd like to do that.
Anybody else have an interest?
I can do that again.
Laura as well. Is that typically a 1 person or can it be a 2-person thing?
The Souhegan Constitution says it's 1 person, and Community Council bylaws specify it's 1 school board member. Anybody's welcome to attend the meetings, but I believe that the school board only gets 1 vote on Community Council.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm going to put both names down for a minute and let's continue to go through the committees and we'll see where we end up.
Okay. Next is the Expendable Trust Advisory Committee, 2 members. It's an Amherst only committee.
What is a community trust again? Is that the AFC Community Foundation? Amherst Community Foundation?
No, it's for expendable trust funds. So
Don't trust like the stuff we put in the trust for maintenance and that kind of.
correct. That's right.
That shouldn't be Amherst only. The board picks a member. It doesn't matter whether it's Amherst or Mount Vernon.
Well, I understand, but the trust committee is it works with the Amherst keepers of the trust, correct?
No, this is the committee that
Trustee of the trust funds.
that is it's required to review and approve all requests for withdrawal before they go to the board. So it's a gatekeeper with a set number of members. I think about 6 members, and it's the usual deal where it's 1 or 2 board members, 1 from advisory finance, blah blah blah. It's specified in the original motion to create that trust.
Got it. Thanks.
So is there any interest in this? How often does that meet, Steve? Any idea?
Only if there's a demand to withdraw from the maintenance expendable trust.
Okay.
I'll do that if you want.
Like to be on it? Okay.
Sure.
Dave, Jen? Any
Is there
other?
a second?
I'll do it also.
Okay.
I hear someone else talking who would rather do it more than me.
No?
I volunteered. I'd like to.
Yeah, we got.
I don't mind doing it.
All right now, Dave is my first volunteer. And then I got Stephanie and Steve. It's a 2-person, Adam?
I'll defer to Stephanie.
It is 2 people, yes.
Okay. So Stephanie can do it then with Dave. Stephanie, Ryan, and Dave. Okay.
All right, everybody's favorite duty, manifest review. 2 board members to review, approve all manifests.
All right, be the new person. I'll just step up and be 1.
Okay, perfect. Stephanie.
I understand how it works.
Thank you.
It's quite easy now that it's all electronic. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if nobody else wants it, I'm happy to take my turn in the rotation once again.
Okay, Steve, you got, oh, okay, hold on. So instead of Steve, I think Laura is expressing some interest in that. So since Laura, you haven't done it yet, right?
Yeah, I haven't, I'd like to do it just once.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's good experience to try it out. So I've done it a few times myself. So if Steve, if you don't mind, let Laura and Stephanie take that one.
I don't mind at all.
Okay.
All right. Next, the policy committee representatives, 2 members.
Interest in policy committee, Laura.
I'll do that.
Okay, one.
And that's my favorite area. I'm happy to do that again.
Okay, Laura and Steve.
I'm happy to step aside. Joy.
All right. PPC, 2 members. Even though we just passed a contract, the PPC committee does still meet. Not quite as often as we did when we're negotiating a new agreement, but we still need 2 members of the board for PPC.
I'll continue with that.
George on there? George, do you have any interest?
Yeah, I was actually going to respond. I'd like to do that as well.
And I'd like to stay on that as well. And I'll point out that although it doesn't, in theory, won't meet as often, we have a meeting scheduled on Thursday.
Oh, okay. And that's a 2-person committee?
It is.
So I'll step aside. So George, the only thing is it meets typically right after school. So I don't know, is there a way to have an alternate if you're not able to go? I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. I'm actually, working quite a bit with Concord right now, and having an alternate would be a good idea.
Can we do that? So George is officially on it, but I'm an alternate?
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, sure.
I think that should work. Would that work, Adam?
I think that's fine. Okay. PTSA, 2 members for the PTSA.
Any hands up?
When does people
All right.
meet?
Oh, Stephanie's go. Go ahead. I don't
Yeah,
know. Does anybody know how often the PTSA meets?
No, when?
Or when?
Yeah, what time is it?
They meet at night, and they only meet a few times a year now. They just have limited fundraisers and activities.
yeah.
Interested?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll
Okay.
go with Stephanie.
Dave and Stephanie?
Now that Dave's been appointed, I just found out the PTSA is going to be meeting twice weekly starting next week. Okay.
Well, we'll have to meet in Tahoe or something like that. To make
All right. New Hampshire School Board Association, 1 representative.
So that can be me. I'm on the executive board. So makes it easier for all of you if you want to just keep me on it.
I'd like to do that.
Okay. Is there anybody else that has any interest? Not Dave?
So I'm on it no matter what, but if you want to,
Okay, at the state level? maybe?
yep.
Okay, well, in that case, maybe it would be good for Laura to be on as well, and then we can have both perspectives.
Sounds good.
All right. 1 more, and then we can go back to community council. So Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, 2 members on this board.
So I'd like to stay on that, but I'm willing to defer if somebody else wants to.
So I'm chairing that right now.
Yeah.
I'd like to stay on.
Yeah, okay. Anybody other interest?
And we actually had 3 on last time.
Oh, did we? Forgive me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So we can
Yeah.
have 3 again.
See,
Yeah, we have, I think Dave was on and Laura was an alternate, but it, whatever.
Well, one of the reasons Pim was on it, because we needed Mount Vernon representation anyway.
Yep.
That was a big thing, and then 2 from Amherst. I thought that was the idea.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really the idea, but it ended up being that way. But anyway, I guess back to, so Amy and I, and will stay on, and who wants to be a third and or alternate? Anybody?
I can do it, or Stephanie had her hand up.
Go ahead, Laura.
Good interest?
It doesn't matter to me if Laura wants it. If we're not, I'll take it if she doesn't. Yeah, I'm up for that one.
The next meeting is Thursday, Stephanie.
Okay,
Put it on your calendar.
I will.
So, Stephanie can be the member, and or if you want to work it out with her to be alternate, that's fine.
You don't want, you're not going to be on?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Oh, you are, okay.
Yeah. Stephanie will be the third, and Laura, just like you and Laura were doing alternate things before.
Well, wait. I mean, Amy's on it, right?
Yeah.
And then you,
Yeah.
and then
Stephanie.
Stephanie and Laura?
No.
No.
Amy would be, Laura would be an alternate, just as Amy and I and you were on it before, and Laura was an alternate.
All right,
And you guys flip-flop, remember?
So
Anyway.
it's Kim, Amy, David, and then Stephanie's. not.
No, Dave's not on.
No,
No, it's not on.
No.
Okay.
Okay, that's settled, I think, right?
Yeah, and then back to community council and we're done.
Okay, so community council, I think that it would be good for Amy to stay on that, or you've got like 3 or 4 different other committees. Amy, how many? You've got 2 or 3?
Yep.
No,
Yeah, I don't have as many as I've had in the past. So, and I did community council 2 years ago, and Laura had the opportunity to do it last year. So I think it makes sense to alternate, and I'd love to go back to it this year.
Well, you no longer have children in the school. So I still have children in the school. And I'd like to see someone on community council that has children in the school. And I know that's not a requirement. And I think you've served on it before. And if not me, I'd rather see Stephanie,
Well, so
since she has children in the school, or even Kim. if
I
you-
don't think that actually has anything to do with it.
it shouldn't have anything to do with it from my perspective. It's all about communicating what's going on in community council back to the board.
I just think Amy has a lot, and she's the SAU 39 chair as well. And I think we're intended to work as a board and not just individuals that have a lot of committees already.
Well,
this
that's
is
why I'm
something
saying.
that I served on it. This is my 2nd year serving on it. One is a community member, one is a board member.
Yes,
I don't mind handing it to someone else for a new person, but I don't think Amy
All right, hold on a second.
is.
Danae, do you have the full list of committees so far? Can you, how many committees do we have signed up for Amy, and how many for Laura? I'm just trying to even it out. That's all I want to try to do.
For Amy, I see her as an alternate on PPC, on the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Eve.
And then for Laura, I see her on the manifest, policy, the NHSBA. And
Where Amy's
that's-
on that too.
And Amy's, yeah, Amy's on that too.
Well, she's already on.
She's
at
already
state
on
level.
it, yeah.
Yeah, so that way, to make it even, I say, give community council to Amy. You can still attend as a public person.
Amy still has the board for SAU 39.
Laura,
That's a
Laura,
different-
hang on one second. So we will be voting on a new chair for SU 39. So that is not, we haven't had our organizational meeting for that yet.
And you're the vice
Mr.
chair of the Souhegan board, and you're on the committee for selecting the new principal. You were on the committee for selecting
Okay,
Empower.
Laura, let's not get personal, please.
I'm just trying to. put
I understand, but it sounds like you're getting things down to a personal level, which we can't have, okay? So let's,
Perhaps you call a vote, Mr. Chair?
please, let's call for a vote for, so are you asking, Adam, that we should vote for this particular position?
I think so. Seeing how there's two people who want it, who there's clear disagreement, perhaps you just have the board.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes, Dave.
Ken, I'd like to understand more about what the, what the role actually is and what the attributes, so therefore I can come to my own conclusion of what the attributes need to be and that kind of thing. So, I mean, is it just one member of the massive community council? Is that the idea here? Or, I mean, is that in concept what it is? Or does that person speak for the board on these things? Or how does, what is the role actually?
Do you want to
Would
answer?
you like me to speak to that?
Please.
I can attempt to answer that. Souhegan's Constitution believes in what's called a three-legged stool of leadership. And those three legs of that stool are community council, the school board, and the school administration. And so the person who serves as the school board liaison to the community council has a vote. They are able to vote in a way that they see fit as a member of the community council. And then their job is also to liaise with the school board about the decisions the community council has made and to advocate for those positions with the school board, even if it conflicts with that particular school board member's vote at the community council level. So, in a similar way to the advisory finance committee, where a board member or two attends the advisory finance committee as a liaison and then reports back to the school board. The difference with community council is it's written into the Constitution at Souhegan that board member has a vote and is a voting member of the community council.
So if it's one leg of a three-legged stool, why are there 50-some people on it and only one school board member? Doesn't seem
because the school board has the final statutory authority for most things and has to approve things that community council does. And so the school board members' participation is meant to attempt to have consensus among the various three legs so the stool doesn't tip over.
Well, it seems like the stool is weighted very heavily on a different side than the board is on. So has the board have, the way you stated it, does the board have any veto authority or anything? You said it's by the board, the power is granted by the board. Does the board have any veto authority?
Well, ultimately, the board has final responsibility for all policy, budget, hiring of a superintendent, and to the extent that community council passes anything that has to do with policy, legally, the school board has to approve that. And the school board could not approve any of those things that are passed by community council, therefore vetoing it. So the school board has no ability to abdicate their responsibility or abdicate their authority, but they do have the authority to delegate responsibility, and which is what community council largely is tasked with being, as a delegation of the school board's responsibility. But ultimately, the school board is legally the final say when it comes to anything policy or budget related.
So the school board member's position is just like you and I are liaisons to athletic committee. They're the liaison to the community council.
Well, but Pim, for you and I, it's mostly a communication responsibility. We work with, I mean, you know how we do. We work with Ann and whatever. In this situation, there's a very weighty principle that's involved here. And I'm concerned that, the weight of the board means nothing at community council, basically. And I'm concerned that we, whoever we appoint doesn't advocate that responsibility more and more and more. You know what I'm saying? Because it just feels to me like this has gone out of this three-legged stool has gone way out of balance here. And so to me, it requires some adjustment, and maybe the leadership of that position would help in some ways. So I know what I'm gonna do.
Okay. Would you like to vote then?
Sure.
Can we nominate someone else? Amy and I have both served. I wouldn't mind another board member being more familiar with what community council does by attending meetings.
Sure. I mean, we're free to nominate as many as you want.
Mr. Chair, could we perhaps have our community council liaison, Delaney Fox, weigh in if you're comfortable with that?
Certainly. Is she available?
She is. She's on the line, and Delaney, you can jump in.
So am I able to vote on this?
You don't get a vote. Why should you get a vote?
No, you can enlighten us as to whatever your feelings of what the board member does on in the community council and your experiences while you've been on community council and in your current position.
Sure. I think that it's very important to have adults from the community involved in community council, and we already have our 5 community reps, but then the school board rep adds an extra part of that. And I do feel that Amy knows a little bit more about our culture, which would help with like the community council discussion. And she had 3 kids who went through the school, and I know that they've graduated, but that almost adds a bit to it, because then she knows the college process, with all 3 of them, and with the changes in the grading system and all that stuff, which is a big topic at community council currently. I think that she could have some good insight with that.
Thank you for your input. All right, we need to move this along. So let's do we have another nomination, Laura? Or no?
I was gonna say Stephanie or George or you or Dave. Someone other than the 2 of us that have already served.
Okay. Does anybody else that's other than Amy or Laura have any interest in taking this position on community council?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Please, George.
Real quick, in the interest of succession planning, because Delaney brought up some good points, because there are issues that they're currently dealing with that Amy certainly would help speed along just due to her experience. But what about, succession planning? Is there a process for that to get someone else up to speed in case, God forbid, someone need to be brought on ad hoc or anything along those lines?
I've never heard of any succession planning for any of these committee positions, to be honest. So, although I would, I think anybody who has any interest in community council would probably get up to speed fairly quickly just by being an active member. That actually was my role as a community member prior to joining the board quite some time ago now, but that was a great introduction and I had no previous experience. So it's just one of those things that you get into and you learn. So I don't know if that answers your question appropriately.
You did.
Okay. All right, yes, Dave.
There's something to be said about being a part of the culture. I mean, I do understand that, but on the other hand, new insight, fresh insight makes a big difference as well.
Sure.
You can use it, you can do the same thing over and over and over again. You can never break out of that loop if that is, in fact, a questionable loop.
Yep.
I'm not personally interested in that myself, as an individual. So I decline the idea that I would do it. But I do feel like there are times and inflection points in the growth of an organization that new insight is the most important thing you bring in. And so I would look to somebody new. My personal feeling is that it's somebody new that should be going on, and they get enculturated pretty fast, you know, it's not an impossible thing.
Sure,
So-
so I know. I mean, I would recommend maybe that if there are any new members who have not experienced community council that want to ease into it, can certainly join it as, you know, as a non-voting member. Anybody from the public is allowed to attend. So they're just not a voting member, that's all. All right, we need to move this along. So if there's no other nominations at this point, just call for a roll call vote between Amy and Laura to take the position on community council.
Stephanie said that she might.
No, I'm not gonna do it. I have enough on the committee list that I'm on. If anything, I would go to learn more about it, but I've not actually attended any meetings, so it's probably not appropriate for me to jump on right away like that.
Okay, so I'll ask for a roll call vote. George?
Amy, yes.
Okay. Dave?
Laura, yes.
Okay. Stephanie?
Laura, yes.
Laura? Laura, okay. Amy?
Amy.
Steve?
Amy,
You guys leave it up to me again? I'm gonna be the bad guy no matter what I say, so.
We support.
And as I mentioned earlier, I want to balance out the committees, so I'm gonna have Amy sit on it. And well, next year we can look to make a change, okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I did forget two committees that Steve Coughlin serves on. That they're more ad hoc committees. Well, actually, one isn't. One is an internal communication committee at the high school that Steve participates with, and then also separate from community council, there is a constitutional interpretation committee, which rarely meets. In fact, was not even fully constituted. Like how I slipped that word in there. For the last couple of years, but Steve did serve on that last year. So both of those should be appointed by the board again.
Okay, Steve, could you give background on either one of those positions or both?
so the communications committee is 99%, I'm sorry, 98% school personnel. It meets roughly once a month. I show up representing the board, and Rick Katzenberg shows up representing the public. And mostly we talk about how to improve communications to the public, which frequently focuses on articles for newspapers. So it's all about trying to get word out about the school through local press mostly.
Okay.
And that meets during the school day in the office.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any interest in the communications committee? Seeking nominations.
And I'll give it up happily, but if no one else wants it, I'll keep going.
All right, seeing none, congratulations, Steve.
So I'd like to learn about that maybe from you, Steve, so that you talking about succession plans. I think it's really important. So I don't know if we can have me as an alternate for that.
We could appoint multiple peoples because it's not the membership is not in a policy. It just is who's willing to show up and do the work.
Okay, yeah, I'll help with that.
That's the communications. All right, and the second committee, Steve, can you enlighten us on that one?
The Constitutional Interpretation Committee is defined in the Constitution as having, I think, 4 or 5 members, one of whom is the school board member, and it exists to do nothing until someone brings a question to it. Last year, we had an organizational meeting, and then no questions arose, so we never met again. I imagine next year there'll be an organizational meeting, and if history is any guide, it will never meet again.
All right, so it doesn't sound like much of a time commitment. Do I see any nominations?
It's my favorite committee because it's not much of a time commitment.
Anybody else care to have a low time commitment committee assignment? No, seeing none. Steve, would you like to stay on?
Sure.
All right.
I'll cancel my vacation.
Excellent. Okay. I think we're finally done with the organizational portion of the meeting. Is that correct, Al?
Very good.
Okay. Are we at the superintendent's report?
We are, and I've got a number of items, Mr. Chair. So first, it's my pleasure tonight to place in a nomination a new principal for Souhegan High School. Over the last several months, going back to when Peggy Silva was interviewed and discussed by the board and led that committee, and then several times over the last several months, a hiring committee has met with the purpose of identifying our next principal at Souhegan High School. We reviewed many resumes and conducted interviews with I believe, roughly 8 to 10 nominees or applicants. We narrowed the list down to 3 that came to Souhegan High School a few weeks ago and were interviewed by different groups of parents, students, school board members, teachers, and building level administrators, as well as SAU level administrators. After that process, there was one clear finalist that was identified. That person, we had a virtual interview with members of his high school, including some of his students, teachers, colleagues, etc. And then we had him come down and spend additional time in Souhegan High School and was introduced and interviewed by all of the Souhegan faculty via Zoom, and has come away as the clear nominee for principal of Souhegan High School. So his name is Michael Berry. He's coming to us from the White Mountains Regional High School in Whitefield, New Hampshire, where he's been since 2012 as principal. Before that, going back to 2009, he was an assistant principal and athletic director there. He's originally from the New England area, spent some time in Georgia, but has come our way. And so what I'd like to do is I've got a few members of the hiring committee I'd like to introduce in turn just to speak about their unique perspectives regarding Michael Berry. And so Andy Emerson, if you would start, followed by Tony Doucette. Andy.
Sure, thanks, Adam. I think what I saw and what a lot of the members of the committee saw was that Michael really has a great idea and knowledge of where we've come from as a school and where we started as a school. And he was one of the only candidates that had the depth of knowledge of kind of the culture of Souhegan and what were all the foundations that we have. And I just thought he was far and above the right candidate, not only to help us kind of stay rooted in those foundations, but also move us forward. Because I think it's time for us also to be looking forward. And I think he also brings to the table a lot of ideas that others that came forward, I think, just didn't have. So I'm really excited to have him on board.
Great.
Tony.
Hi, thank you. From the very beginning, I was very impressed with Michael from when he, during a snowstorm, drove into the school to have his first initial sort of Zoom call with us. I was so impressed by his passion, and not only that, his ability to, everything we talked about, he had great examples for how he implemented those things at White Mountain, and he brought so many ideas that were different and interesting. And I was one of the facilitators of his first interview with a panel of teachers, and they just came away as impressed with him as I was. And that was great to hear. I'm very excited that we're bringing him forward and think he's going to do a good job leading us in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony.
Next, I'd like to hear from, we had 2 student representatives that represented the school. One is our school board liaison, Delaney Fox. Delaney.
Yeah, so I also agree with everything that Tony and Andy said. I was super impressed with him from the beginning, and especially impressed with his the connection that he seemed to want to have with the students. From the first in-person meeting that we had, I had to bring him into the little room in the brick school as we waited for the other candidate to walk down, since it was also confidential. And even right then, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what are we going to talk about during this awkward 2 minutes as we just sit here? But he was asking me about what classes I took and really seemed like he already wanted to get to know me, even just the second step of the process. So that definitely left an impact on me. And then also, he just really seemed to care and help make change at Souhegan. And then during the student panel that Georgia and I facilitated, all the students were unanimously felt that he should be the principal at Souhegan.
Thank you, Delaney. Our other representative was Georgia Craven. Georgia.
Hi, guys. I'm Georgia. I'm a junior at Souhegan. So I agree with everybody who has spoken already, but the first the first phone call we had with Michael Berry, it was in the middle of a snowstorm, and he drove to his school so he wouldn't lose connection. And then we lost connection, and he immediately called us on the phone and did his whole interview through the phone. And that just stood out to me, and I think everybody else on the panel, of just commitment. And he's shown a love for our school, not even like being there many times before. He had read all the past minutes for community council, which to me, I was like, yeah, that's awesome, because even people on community council don't read the minutes sometimes. So I was like, wow, that's super awesome. And then our first in-person meeting, he sat down, Delaney and I said afterwards, we were like, oh my gosh, we can see him in the office already as our principal after talking to him once. And he made it a point to ask Delaney and I like what we think we should do with the school. And that was really awesome, because we love student leadership and student voice at Souhegan. And it just stood out to us. And I absolutely loved facilitating the student panel with Delaney, because then we got to hear all the wonderful feedback from the students on that panel, and just the unanimous decision that it would be an honor to have Michael Berry as our principal, and not just like, oh, we need to find a principal who would be the best option. It was like, no, he's the guy, no matter who's out there. So that was awesome. And yeah, I've been a huge fan ever since the beginning. So
Great. Thank you.
That is true. Georgia advocated well. So Michael is with us on the Zoom call, and so I'd like to introduce him to the school board and the community now. So Michael, sorry to put you on the spot, but if you'd be willing just to share some of your thoughts about why Souhegan High School. Oh, I'm sorry. I think you're muted, Mike. That was my fault.
Unlucky. Hey, good evening. I appreciate the time, the opportunity. I enjoyed watching the proceedings so far, getting a window into how the school board kind of operates. But I'll defer back to when I first sat down with the interview committee, down at the brick building, and I said, it's really a privilege and an honor to be in the position where I can be interviewing for the Souhegan job. I feel like my career has led me to this position. I feel like my experiences have led me to this position. I don't take it lightly, and I take the opportunity as very much an honor and a privilege. The more I've researched about Souhegan and reflected on what I knew about Souhegan growing up only 30 minutes away in Massachusetts, it is a school where you can do something with. The community is super supportive. It has a reputation to have strong teachers. Adam is definitely a match for me as far as philosophy and how ambitious and big of a thinker he is. And the more I think about Souhegan, I just think there's a lot of things that you can do there, and it's a really established school district, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work with really talented, really smart students and faculty and other educational leaders. So that's kind of where I'm at, and that's kind of what I'm thinking as I kind of watch you guys tonight.
Well, so it's my great honor to place in a nomination Michael Berry as principal for Souhegan High School for a 3-year term the starting salary of $135,000 effective July 1st, 2020. And for those board members who are new, the way the laws in New Hampshire work is only the superintendent can nominate someone for principal or teacher, but the board then has to elect those people. So my nomination now requires the board to make a motion to elect Michael for the terms I put forward.
Do anybody like to make that nomination? From the board?
I'll make the nomination.
All right, thank you, Amy. Do I have a second?
I'll second Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Roll call. Dave Chen?
No.
Laura? Yes. Amy?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
If it would please the chair, I'd like to state why I'm voting no.
Yes, you may state why.
I'm very disappointed in the process for selecting Mike. Mike and I spent 2 hours yesterday in my backyard talking about many things, but one of the things I talked to him about was that I'm disappointed in the process. It is true that Adam has the right to nominate, only the right to nominate this person or whoever he chooses. And in my case, I raised the issue multiple times that you bring the board one candidate at the end of this process, and the board in general has no input into this process and no dealing with the process at all up until this point in time. And I make a joke about it. I've said many times that this is like a communist Chinese election to the Politburo. And Adam is Chairman Mao in this case. You know, I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm just trying to make a point that we have at this moment in time only one choice.
Okay.
You know, I want to oppose this process because I don't want it to happen again, and I want something to change about this. I raised this issue multiple times during board meetings, and I don't know, everybody laughed, and maybe I shouldn't have made it a funny kind of thing because people laughed about it and they forgot about it. Okay. The second part of this thing that bothers me is that this process is driven by basically, you know, there are a lot of things that could have been done to engender the board as a board into this whole process and selecting Mike and all this kind of thing. And there could have been a lot of things done. So, for example, we never knew anything about the process itself. We didn't approve a process. You know, the board is responsible for policy, and policy would state to you that we could say what the policy is for recruiting this candidate or finding the candidate or selecting the candidate, that we have the right to do that as a board. And we did not make that. The case was never put to me what the process should be and why it should be that way. The second thing is that we could have put together requirements, or somebody could have come to us and say these are the requirements that come to us, the board, and said these are the requirements, and we could have said yes, we think those are the requirements, or we think you got to change here or change there. But the fact that no board input was actually taken in this whole process until this moment in time, really upsets me about the way the board is being treated, the responsibilities that we have that we discharge and we don't take any advantage of it, and the fact that we really shouldn't be, if we want to be a board, you have to be a board and make some decisions at some point. This decision is a forced decision on us. We don't really have, while we have a right to say no, many of you said yes because you know that there's no alternative here. There really is an alternative. And I resent, I think that is not the way to conduct the business of the school board. And it's representative of a whole attitude around how the school board deals with problems, deals with questions. And I don't think that, I think we need to understand that and adjust it.
Okay, thank you for that. I think your point is taken. I would suggest then that we can look at maybe the process and try to figure out how that process should be improved. I understand your frustration around this. We did have, at one point, we selected Peggy Silva to lead the principal search group, and we did vote on that. I don't know if you were there for that.
I voted yes for that. I asked, and if you, to be perfectly honest, I asked on multiple occasions, when is Peggy going to tell us what the process is so we can decide on it?
Okay.
That never happened.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, because I certainly don't recall that either. However, you know, that we did have some board representation on that panel. But your point is taken, and it would be nice to get the board more, if not necessarily involved, but at least kept up to date as to what was happening on a regular basis.
On a regular basis, I would ask in board meetings, will you give us an update? You know, and I didn't, and basically what we got is an update, and we interviewed 3 candidates. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what the criteria were for selecting those 3. You know, we were given snippets of updates, but no details of the update. You know, no details that we could say we don't like this process now. Okay. This whole process, so I'm disturbed about the way the process went.
Okay.
And I think it should be addressed at some point by the board.
Okay, so I agree. I understand what you're saying, and I agree it should be, the process should be addressed. The path is in the past. I think that Mike is a good candidate. I don't know what the other candidates were, so I have no comparison point, but I think based on you know, my limited exposure, that he's a good candidate for principal of Souhegan High School. So we're going to move forward. We did vote already as a board, 6-1. And so I would say to Adam that his nomination has been voted in, and you may address Mike and let him know that he's going to be the next principal of Souhegan High School. I understand that, but he's not reporting to us, or you know, so he's going to be reporting to Adam, and Adam could be the one to provide him with that formal information.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, George.
One quick comment. Just to, I did not say yes because there was no other alternative. I said yes because, you know, I do trust Adam's decision-making process. He is an employee of Adam, and I'm sure if at some time in the future, maybe, if the decision didn't work, we would address that as a board. So I just want to make it clear, I didn't say yes because I had no alternative. I said yes because I do believe in Adam's decision-making.
Yeah, and I agree and support that and echo that same comment.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Please go.
So as superintendent these last number of years and as business administrator before, I believe I've developed a reputation for being very transparent, open, and deferring to the board, even in areas that are not specifically the board's purview, for the interest of keeping the peace and working well together. However, I have to say that when it comes to selecting a principal, an assistant principal, teachers, that's my job and my job alone. And if any school board passed a policy that took that authority away from me, I would not work for that school board. The reason that the state believes that's the way it ought to be is that school boards are supposed to hold superintendents accountable for their decisions. If Michael Berry doesn't work out as principal at Souhegan High School, you need to look at me and hold me accountable for selecting him as your principal. If you as the board had selected him as your principal, then you would be responsible for his performance as principal. That's how it works. In Massachusetts, the school board has no say whatsoever. The superintendent hires, fires, terminates, renews all employees without any authority from the board whatsoever. New Hampshire believes the board ought to have some ability to approve or not approve teachers, principals, assistant principals, etc. And I have to say that while I think it is important to include the board in the process to some level, that I feel extremely strongly that my role as superintendent is to make this selection on my own using whatever process I determine. In this case, I chose to have a committee representative of the community, of teachers, of students, and of the school board. But I don't have to do that. I could have simply had the process be interviews with me and me alone and made a selection that way. But instead, I included as many different representative groups as I could along the way to build consensus for this person. And I have to say, I hope Michael Berry is still willing to sign his contract, because a 6-1 vote that's not unanimous is something that is difficult for some people to overcome. I probably wouldn't have come as superintendent with anything less than a unanimous vote of the school board. So I understand where Dave is coming from. I understand his point of view and his perspective, but there's one area of my job that I simply will not abdicate, and that's selection of educators to lead our schools and to teach our students. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Okay. So I would then amend what I was saying earlier about the reviewing the process. I think at some point in the future, since it is your process, maybe you would like some additional input of ways that things may go smoother in the future, if you so wish.
Absolutely. I have a few other issues for my superintendent's report, if I can continue.
Please.
First, I have a draft of the school board meeting calendar that I'll put up on the screen. So I'd like to have the board, this is in the Trello board, which I'll talk about in a minute, but this is for the board's review and adoption. These are all of the meetings from now through next June. I'm sorry, from August through next June. The purpose of the board being aware of these dates is because our deliberative session, our public hearing, et cetera, are all included here. So no action is needed right now, but I would just ask the board between now and the next meeting in in April, to review these dates and make sure these dates work for board members. Something to note is we coordinate all of these board meetings with all of the other boards. We also make sure we avoid certain times a year when there are many night events in our schools. We avoid major holidays, both religious and U.S. holidays, to try to make these dates all come together. And you'll note that the green dates are dates where there would be a combined board meeting with the other boards, like we're doing this particular spring, starting in April. So no action this evening, but I wanted to share that with the board and let you know that those are there for your review before the next meeting. Next, I just mentioned the Trello board. So the Trello board has all of the organization of our board meetings and all of our meeting agendas included there. I believe Abby reached out to you folks today as board members to review and to make sure you had access to that. If you have any trouble accessing that board, please let me know. A couple of things to note about that board. First, there's a list of all of our meetings on the left that include all of the board meeting packets, agendas, and minutes. Then there's an organization list that lists all of the meeting dates I just mentioned. Board contact information will be included there. Our public hearing and deliberative session meeting dates. Our board assignments that we just went over tonight are listed there as well. Then there's a list for new agenda items submitted by board members. Here, board members can submit any agenda items they'd like the chair of the board to include on future meeting agendas. And then going out to the right is a list for each of our board meetings that are coming up and that have already been scheduled. And so everything you need to know as a board member is included there, and all of our staff that are putting together items for board meetings submit those things there. So it's literally the best place to go to get all of the information about our school board meetings. Next, so none of us have mentioned the biggest topic in the news today so far, and I'm going to mention it now. So the coronavirus, COVID-19, and our response. The only thing that I want to mention for the board right now is that we have some very important traditions at the end of a typical high school career that usually happen for seniors, some for juniors, that we need to be mindful of as we face this crisis. No one knows when we're coming back to school. I am hopeful that we're able to come back to school this school year, but I certainly am not counting on that, and I'm not sure that will be something that we have the opportunity to do. But regardless, I just want the board to be aware that we're going to be thinking about, are there alternative ways to support our graduating seniors and other members of our high school that that have those rites of passage in high school that we need to be considerate of. And so just know that that's something in the back of our minds that we're working on. Even though we're early into this crisis, we're already thinking ahead to those things. Next, regarding COVID-19, I've asked one of our teachers who's on the line, Tony Doucette, to give just an update on how remote learning is going so far. Understand that today was day 3 of us doing school from home. We did Thursday and Friday of last week. Today is Monday. And this was a monumental shift for our educators, required an unbelievable amount of effort, time, and dedication in order to pull this off, and they've done so. I've heard from several other school districts that we are far ahead of the curve, and it's because of the work of our teachers and their building level administrators who've made it happen. But Tony, if you wouldn't mind, would you just give an update about how it's going so far for you and your students?
Yeah, and the first thing I want to do is I want to thank our administration, who had us from the week prior, taking our TLC time, our staff meeting time, and dedicating it to going over resources and doing professional development. And that really put us ahead of a lot of places, I think, in New Hampshire. I mean, I have friends who teach in Concord and Goffstown and Manchester, and from everything I hear, we're far ahead of the game. The thing I've been most impressed by has been the students in terms of just a little statistical evidence. We had on Thursday, the first day, we had one kid on our 9th grade team who was, you could say, like, absent for that day. And communication with parents has been so important. And I think we have been, it's been a great back and forth, but the kids have been working so hard and so thoughtful. One of the biggest takeaways is with advisory. Under this schedule, we're meeting twice a week, and the scheduled time is an hour. And when we first started it, usually advisory is 25 minutes. I've met twice with my advisory, and both times the students wanted to stay for the full hour because I think they're craving that social interaction. I think advisory has been a really huge help for them as well. But work is coming in, I would say, at almost a higher rate right now than prior. But I do worry that, eventually, like we had a community council executive meeting today, and one of the kids said, yeah, it's going great. Like, I can't believe how well prepared the teachers have been. It's going to get old if we have to do this for the rest of the year, but I think it's going, as excellent so far.
Great.
Thank you, Tony, very much. Appreciate that. A couple more things. So first, Michelle's on the line and is going to speak to our unassigned fund balance projection for the year. This is the time of year we start making that projection for the purpose of thinking about what kind of projects we might do at the year's end if we need to. Normally, I would expect Michelle to be very precise at this time of year with our unassigned fund balance. I have to tell you, I don't have that same expectation right now, given the uncertainty around all of the funding mechanisms that we're going to have in play over these next several months. In short, I'm glad I'm not the business administrator. Michelle, please give us an update.
Well, thanks so much, Adam. I'm not sure about that intro, but it really is telling that folks have been so supportive in switching to distance learning. And part of the challenge with determining an unreserved fund balance is that we really don't know when April 3rd comes what will be happening on April 6th. Will we be back in session? Will this be extended? And if it's extended, for how long? So that raises a lot of questions around our expenditures and our budget for just questions around items that we have contractual obligations with some vendors. If they're not providing a service, where does that put us? in terms of payments. Things like athletic programs, what are we doing with those? And it's a little too soon to tell what's going to happen with some of these things. Supplies, equipment, professional development, all look a little different than what it would look like if we were completely in session. That being said, there are some things that are expenditures that we're incurring that weren't planned, that are necessary given this new learning initiative and our new approach to teaching for the moment. So that being said, what I can tell you is that there are a couple different pieces to the unreserved fund balance. There's the revenues and unanticipated revenues that are coming in higher than budgeted. And there's the expenditure side and whether or not we fully expend our appropriations. So on the revenue side, let's take that first. I anticipate about 127,000 of revenue that's in excess of what was budgeted. It's important to remember that that will fall through to the fund balance and be used to offset the tax rate at the end of the year, because it does not, additional revenues does not equate to increase in appropriations and does not give us the authority to spend that money. On the expenditure side, right now, our budget is very tight. We're anticipating that we would continue to expend some areas that I just mentioned that are questionable. So I'm going to provide a range to you, and it's going to sound like a very large range, but it is really because there are some big ticket items that we are just uncertain at this point whether or not they will continue to occur or not. So the range is, we could be right now at a 0 on unexpended budgetary expenditures, up to 443,000. So that's a big range, but I'll give you one example. Coaches and for athletic programming, that's about 49,000 right there. We have professional development that will look different, but I don't know how different that's going to look and to what extent we will utilize those funds. And then, other contractual obligations that the service, as I said, from vendors may not be provided, but it is yet to be determined what that would mean. And if we come back in session, those types of services will resume. So that's, I know, a big range, but I'm happy to provide more information if you would like more detail, but don't want to go into a lot of detail if this is sufficient to give you an idea of where I think we'll be.
Well, Michelle, if you would jump right into the end of year projects, which I have John Robichaux's list, if you want me to put that up on the screen, and maybe you could talk through some of those things. Does that work?
Yes, that would be great.
And thank you all for your patience as we are navigating this world of Zoom meetings for the first time. So Michelle, you can start, and I'll put it up on the screen in just a second.
Okay. And as you said, navigating this world of Zoom, I've flopped over to look at the Trello board and now seem to have lost my list from John. And then, so here we go. Okay. So we have a couple of projects that are currently underway. The list includes replacing 2 water tanks at the high school. That was on our capital needs assessment recommendations. And we have had a problem with those tanks. And so that, I believe this is the project that is currently underway, but I'll have to confirm that with John, because as I'm looking at it again, I thought it said water tanks, but it says water heaters, and I believe that these are one and the same. So that's about 27,500 and includes a rebate. We have gas shut off in the kitchen, which is to install a shut off. We don't have one, and that should be done. We'd have to shut, if we wanted to be more precise in closing service to a particular location instead of shutting off the whole building. So that's 2,700. And I'm happy to entertain any questions as we go along if folks have questions. A water heater in the kitchen, we're looking at actually replacing that with a tankless system. And that's about 16,800 for that project. we have, those two items, the gas shutoff and the water heater in the kitchen, are not on the capital needs assessment, but we did identify the water heater in the kitchen as an issue when we had the issue with the service to the high school. Thank you, Adam. Some HVAC controls, these are planned over time with the capital needs assessment. So we could certainly look at expediting that process if the funds are available, or continue along our path with those items. I think John has recommended looking at taking care of the annex as one possibility. And that's about $42,900 for just the annex portion of that. Glycol, the hot water loop, that's something that John has talked about doing there as well. It's a more of a service related item, but something that we should do to maintain that system, $37,500. And then security upgrades, there's a list of items that we could identify, that we could tackle there. $9,300 for the mini gym doors, the annex back stairwell, $5,800, and the panic pull, mapping for the panic pull stations, $8,600 there. And then for the locker rooms, replace the, I'm not exactly sure, I'd have to get more information on that. I apologize on what the locker rooms project is, but it's $36,000 and we could get more detail on that. If we were to entertain any of these, we'd have to, for projects in the current year, I would need to pursue actual solid quotes, and we'd need to engage in a contract with the vendor to encumber the funds prior to year end. Are there any questions on that?
Anybody have questions?
It's kind of hard to hear you, actually.
Yeah.
Can you put it back up one more time? I'm sorry.
Is that you, Adam?
No problem. And it is also in the Trello board, but here's the list again.
So these are projects that we have to start thinking about. Should we have some excess unassigned funds? Yeah, unassigned funds, right?
Right.
Yeah, the only other one that's not on here that that I would put near the top of the list would be our science classroom renovations in the annex. But we're working with an architect right now to get a price for that. So that's still in process, but is not listed here.
Okay. What about
clarification?
Dave?
I'm sorry. What about the chemistry labs in the main building? I mean, not the lab so much, but the storage room. The cabinets were falling off the walls. Chemicals were leaking through the iron board or whatever they call them that made those cheap cabinets.
The gas.
Yeah, the gas.
Yeah. So I also support those needs. I would say that with the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, it would be important to figure out what, if any, major project at Souhegan will happen to make sure that we're not throwing good money after bad or repeating a project that we were going to do down the road as part of a larger project at Souhegan. So I would say over the next year, we'll need to figure that out with the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee. The annex science classroom renovations are safe because we know that part of the annex won't be a part of a major Souhegan 2.0 project. And so that's the only reason. But you're absolutely right, Dave. While our labs in the main building are safe and are deemed safe for students, because if they weren't, we wouldn't use them, they also definitely need some attention very soon. And so our Joint Facilities Advisory Committee has to look at those as part of the greater projects that they're evaluating.
And not be safe for the teachers back there, Adam.
What? I'm sorry, Dave?
Never mind. It was a nasty comment.
And if I'll finish my superintendent's report, if that's all right, and then I'm sure there'll be questions on a number of things.
Yeah.
So the last thing I would have is I just want to remind the school board of the major objectives and projects we're working on beyond or somewhat related to our strategic vision as an SAU. Some of those things include our class of 2024 transcript development process, which is underway, joint facilities projects, which we just alluded to, our grading and software committee to evaluate what we're doing with Empower, our school start times process that we're looking at for the next school year. We have some administrative hiring that will be happening. And then we're also developing internally a 5-year budget forecast that will unveil as part of the next budget cycle. But that requires a significant amount of work on the back end to do those things. So I just wanted the board to know before as we start this new board year, to know some of the major topics that we're working on, even beyond some of our other issues. And that's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there are other things that are in progress, but I just wanted to mention those. So that's my entire superintendent's report, and I'll be happy to answer questions about any of those things.
Okay. So for we entertain questions, just for completeness sake, your report, is that something that you can share? Is it on Trello, first of all, and if not, is it something that you can share? Because I'm sure that other questions may come out of that. If we
Sure.
See the detail.
Yep, it is on Trello, and all of the documents I referenced are included in the card in Trello. Everything else I spoke to were just oral updates, but everything that was a document is already included in that card for the board to review.
Okay, now I will ask a question to make me look like I'm not very good at technology. Can you point out where on Trello this is? Because I'm looking at Trello and I can't find it.
Yeah, so in Trello, if you go to the March 23rd, 2020 meeting, under the opening items card, the opening items card has all the things we typically do at the beginning of a meeting. So the superintendent's report, public input, committee updates, community council update, and then down below there I've got the superintendent's report and board objectives list, and then there's some documents included there as well.
Okay, that's how it works. Okay. Thank you. All right, any questions for Adam? I think I'll start off with just one quick question and then open it up to the rest of the board. So under the meetings that you outlined, the different meeting dates, you mentioned that they're going to be with other boards at some point. How do you envision that working? I guess this is news to me, and I don't understand how it's going to work.
Sorry, I didn't hear your entire question. Could you
Sure. Can you
give it to me one more time?
Yeah. Can you enlighten me and anybody else who has a question on how these multi-board meetings will work? You mentioned that there are going to be the joint board meetings with the other boards. Are they all happening concurrently or in different locations? I think that's one of the things I saw. Also, unless I misunderstood you, are there other ones where everybody's in the same room? It's not an SAU board meeting, but it is. I guess I need some clarity. Can you enlighten us?
Sure. So after the reconfiguration committee gave their report, which was essentially it's not appropriate to try to consolidate the SAU. However, we should attempt to act as one whenever possible. That was their recommendation. And so the 4 chairs discussed, and then the SAU board had a discussion about this spring holding joint board meetings where the 3 constituent school boards, Mount Vernon, Souhegan, and Amherst, would have their own time to meet at the same time in the same buildings, so at Souhegan, but in 3 different locations at Souhegan for a brief period of time to do things that are specific to that particular board, things like approving manifests or making hiring of teachers or what have you, and then have an SAU board meeting that is the majority of the agenda items for the night are placed on that SAU board meeting, so that when we're talking about things that span the K-12 realm, we're meeting as one board as opposed to 4 boards repeating the same things. And so the thought was that this spring we would try it out in April and May, where we would have the individual boards meet and then the SAU board meet right after on the same night in an attempt to act as one board to the extent we can. So it's a little bit of an experiment, but it's an intentional try to act as one board if possible.
Okay, thank you. I think my opinion is that we'll have to tread a little bit lightly because there are certain things that revolve solely around the high school that are, as you know, with mastery learning and the whole grading thing, very near and dear to most of our hearts, and we need to ensure that we put in the right amount of time on those topics. So I'm curious and look forward to seeing how this works.
And it may not. We might find that it doesn't work, in which case we'll adjust. Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question for Adam?
Just on the meetings, I think there are lots of things that we haven't quite, and I don't know whether this is an SAU 39 update or if we feel, do we have to submit to Amy, whoever the chair is of SAU 39, if we feel that there should be additional information on the agenda there, like for example, the anchoring adults, the MTSS, these other plates that you have work that you're working on.
Yeah, so I would say that any board member can submit an agenda topic to their respective board chairperson, which is PIM, or to the SAU board chair, which is undefined right now. Amy was the chair, but the board will have to have a new election in April to elect a chair. So either is fine, and the four chairs, I think, are sort of a clearinghouse that way to make sure that the agenda item ends up in the right place. But board policy for Souhegan specifies how a board member can place something on the agenda, and that really is by reaching out to PIM to make sure it gets handled at the Souhegan level.
Any other questions for Adam? Dave?
Yeah, Michelle, the list that you presented of projects, I couldn't tell if there was a priority on those lists in that list or not, if they were in priority order perhaps. And have you thought through the idea that since if we don't go back to school on the 6th of April or whatever the date is, then there's opportunity for, companies to come in and fix things or do whatever we need to do as long as they're socially distanced. There are some things that we could do, and if we're certain that the budget will allow, or the unexpended fund balance budget will allow, then it may be an opportune time to get some of those things done rather than try to force them in the 3 months of summer. Can we?
Right. We are being mindful of the opportunity to look at projects, if the buildings are vacant and move that forward. And balancing that also with being mindful about the, physical distancing and bringing other organizations in and making sure that we have the appropriate process in place for disinfecting and things of that nature while we consider having work done at the schools as well.
I guess the most important thing was the priority order of the projects that had to be done there. Are they in priority order, or it didn't look like it was in an order. I don't know.
No, they are not yet in priority order. I can certainly do that. And part of it will depend on what we have for funds available as well.
Right. Well, we'll know a whole lot more in April than we do now. And if there is a certainty of some funds available, we may want to look at spending it now. That's my point.
Right.
But not now, in April when we get there, and then assuming we're not going to have 740 kids back in the building on April 6th.
I'm not sure if we can expend the money until after the fiscal year.
Sure you can.
I would like to clarify that be important that we encumber the funds. We do have a little bit of flexibility with when the work is done.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So if we're still in this situation that we're currently in with COVID-19 and physical distancing and things of that nature, we can still determine projects that we would use funds from this year to support the cost of, if those items are contractually obligated to. So we could have them encumbered even if the work were done later when the restrictions were lifted, per se.
You just have to make sure you get that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions for Adam, Stephanie?
Yeah, this is Steve.
Hold on, I saw Stephanie's hand first. Sorry, Steve. You're next. You're next.
So Adam, quick question on the transcripts, grading, reporting, start times, all those things, especially I'm thinking the transcripts. You originally had a meeting set up to talk with the AMS parents and things. How are you going forward with that? Are you putting it on hold until we can get back and have meetings? Are you just going to try and implement? I'm curious how that's going. Then I have a second question as well.
Okay. So my first answer is I don't know yet. We have been 24/7 on making the changes we've had to make these past 2 weeks. What I've asked my administrative team is that this week we're still supporting the transition and the work that we've had to go through, but next week is when we get back to business of the other things that we're working on. So we had to cancel our meeting with AMS parents. That was, when was that? Last week or this week? I don't even know when it was scheduled now. I can't. We obviously had to cancel that in-person meeting. We're going to circle back to it. The transcript has to have input from parents. It has to have input from students, teacher. It has to. It just absolutely has to. So we'll find a way this spring. It will not be the same process we put out before. It's going to have to be something like this that's more interactive and online somehow. But we'll start figuring. We'll circle back to that next week. I hope board members understand that it as important as it is, it lowered on its list of priorities for us these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, because I was thinking that all the different things on your list, make sure that we're still communicating everything. So before I completely forget, I did want to say that, honestly, because I have 2 kids in the school, the teachers have been phenomenal at the high school. Totally impressed with them connecting with the kids. The work is getting done. I'm very happy. So kudos to all of them. Then Michelle, one quick question for you. I don't know if this is something we can get a summary of, but all these expenses because of COVID-19 that were not budgeted for, is there some summary list we could get and figure out, or what are we using to offset, or how are we budget, how are we going to cover all those costs? Is there some quick summary that's able to be printed out?
We are tracking those costs. We have a mechanism that allows us to report on those. I think at this point, not all the costs are necessarily in, but that is something that we are wanting to do so that we potentially could report it if any funding becomes available. We're also tracking with staff if there are absences, but that's not something that.
Not right now. You probably don't have them in yet even. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's probably something later just to see what happened.
Yeah, definitely. It is something that we thought of, initially when this was distance learning was coming into play, so that we could, identify items that even if it was something that we were planning to do, but maybe planning to do in the next fiscal year, and we, we're doing it much sooner than planned because of the situation, we're considering that a cost of this issue.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Welcome.
Steve?
Yeah, so on behalf of that Phantom Communications Committee that I'm on, I want to add one more thing to the list of potential items to purchase with unexpended funds. And certainly after looking at the list that Adam and Michelle gave, this isn't my highest priority, but it's the Communications Committee's highest priority. And that's replacing the sign out front with an electronic signboard. The one that's there now was put in when the school was put in, and it is being held together with chewing gum and baling wire, and it's not necessarily safe or easy to update the content of it, which is why it's not getting done as often as it used to be, because it sometimes tries to kill the person who it is updating it. And it's probably not one stiff breeze, but 2 or 3 stiff breezes away from becoming firewood. Amanda went out and got a quote, a bunch of quotes actually, and there is a two-sided panel that the communications committee lusts after, but it'll be in the $24,000 to $25,000 range. It's certainly not of an equal priority with some of the safety matters that Michelle and Adam already talked about, but I want to just get that on the board's radar as something that we should do, because one day you're going to drive by that board and it's going to be laying on its side. And nothing wrong with the maintenance guys. They've been keeping it going, but they cannot work miracles forever.
Yep, that's a good point. Adam, is that something that you have resources within the SAU that could look up costs for that type of board, and maybe confer with Steve and the communications group to understand what they've looked at and any research that they have done?
Yeah, that's fine. And I also added a card to the Trello board called potential end of year projects. That's in the organization list. So that has all of the things in there, and I added the sign to that as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Adam? One second. You already asked him, right? Something? Okay. Yeah, I know. Did you ask something before? I can't remember now. The reason why I asked, I want to make sure everyone else is in it before I circle back to them. Okay, Dave. I don't see anybody else. Go ahead.
Hey, Adam, what is the status of competency-based education? Where are we? I'm hearing all kinds of input from some citizens that they want to stop it. I heard you guys moving forward with it. I don't understand where we are now, to be quite honest. And what is the next step? And is the implementation going to be reviewed at this point, or how? Where are we? Can you give a summary of where we are, meaning as detailed as you can get into it?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I would normally lean on people like Natalie or Kathy White to jump in for things like this, but I'll do my best. We changed our grading system, but that really was in response to that we've changed our instructional system. Several years back, we started working on performance assessment, which is a different way to see what students know and how they can demonstrate what knowledge they've attained and what skills they've acquired. And performance assessment is what we do at Souhegan High School. We're in the kind of the refining phase of that implementation, where there's still some learning going on, but we've in large measure moved to other things. We can't use performance assessment if we haven't changed our instructional methods along the way. And so our instructional methods circle around competency-based instruction, teaching to mastery, making sure students can own material, own skills, and perform them in a variety of ways to solve new problems. The grading system change is sort of the next step in enabling technology to the next things we want to do with our strategic vision. And so what I would say is that we are a mastery learning center of education. We're still learning, we're still refining, we're still growing, but if you talk to most of our teachers, they have said things like, we've relearned how classroom instruction works from the ground up to be a mastery-based system, and it required a ton of effort and a ton of work, and I had to relearn everything I do, but it's made me a better teacher because now I know, because of performance assessment, exactly what my kids have mastered and what they have not. What's the hardest to implement is how we reflect that growth in the classroom. And so our teachers, Natalie, Kathy, Christine, could answer that question a lot more clearly, but I would say that we are one of the leaders in the state. when it comes to mastery education and competency-based instruction. And anywhere I go, I hear people asking questions about how we've done this or how we've done that, and it's because of the work we've done over the last 7 years. So we're well on our way. We still have to work out grading and reporting to be something that reflects what's going on in the classroom and is understandable by colleges and parents and students, and we've still got some work to do there. We know that. But what's happening in the classroom has changed and is continuing to change day by day and month by month. Frankly, we wouldn't be able to adjust to this type of remote learning model had we not done that work for the last several years. Our teachers have to shift how they're communicating with students, but really not how they're teaching, because we've been doing this for the last number of years. So the reason why it's gone so well these last 2 weeks is, number one, because of the effort of our teachers, but number two, because they're already working in a mastery-based system where instruction is less about content memorization or memorizing of information, rote memory, things that are a low depth of knowledge. We're already doing things that are deep and authentic in the classroom. Changing that to a remote environment requires a lot of effort, but it's not a complete reshuffling of the deck. So that's about as deep as I want to go without help from my trusted colleagues.
So can I, go ahead. So the bottom line here, I'm not concerned about all the details that go in a classroom, but the bottom line message to the community is that it's full speed ahead mastery learning, given the fact that we have some issues with grading and transcript and that kind of thing. Is that correct? That's a simpler statement?
100% the statement to the community.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question for Adam?
I had a couple questions, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, George.
Real quick, this one is for Michelle. She had mentioned earlier that there was about $120,000 increased revenues. Can you tell me what's driving that?
Yep, there's three major areas. CAT aid is higher than what was projected. Tuition is a little higher than what was projected, and Medicaid revenue is higher than what was projected. I will say that typically numbers are conservative because we don't want to be short on revenue, right. But that's going to yield about $127,000 that will again be in the fund balance.
And I'm sorry, what's the CAT aid?
Catastrophic aid. We get sorry for the short terminology.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And then thank you, Michelle. And then the other two, I guess either Adam or Michelle, the items that you had shown previously on the screen as far as potential expenditures, those are more geared toward capital maintenance and upkeep as opposed to anything new, like new functionalities. I mean, I did see some dollars there allocated for security issues and things like that. But other than that, I think it was all related to maintenance items, correct?
Right.
Okay. And then last but not least, let's say worst case scenario, the school effectively the year is done and it's all done remotely. What happens with the contracts for, let's say, buses and food expenditures like that? Are we still on the hook for those throughout the end of the year?
Well, those are some of the things that I had said. We do have some contractual obligations that is yet to be determined how that will play out. It's hard to know if we're back in session, then those contracts are back operational. I need to review the contracts to see what the language in the contract says. And then also, if we are not coming back, what that impact would be.
Thank you.
Okay, Dave has a question, but does anybody else who has not spoken yet have a question? Or I go to Dave? No? Okay, Dave, go ahead.
I don't know if this is for Adam or what, but how is the vocational education being handled. Kids that get sent to National North High School for vocational education. How's that being handled? Is that essentially dead now because National is not accepting the kids, or how does that work? What kind of learning is going on for so-called STEM kids, which CTE kids?
Sure. So I'm going to see if Bill Hagan is on the line. And Bill, I'm going to ask if you're comfortable, if you might give an update on vocational ed. If not, that's okay. But Bill, go ahead.
Yep. Can you see me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
So we, the vocational folks have been in contact with student services, and they are working along the same lines as we are working. They're working remotely where they can with students. I talked with Karen Chininis, and she indicated that they have been in contact with us and they have been in contact with students. So our expectation is that they are continuing their work remotely where that's possible.
How is it possible, Bill? That's what I don't get.
Well,
but a lot of mechanic shop.
Dave, I don't have the classes in front of me, but how is it possible for us to work remotely? In a science lab, our science teachers are moving forward with what they can teach. In a chemistry lab, it may not be possible to have labs that were planned. The same kind of thing with some of the CTE courses. There may be courses where some of the things that were scheduled to happen in a classroom may not be able to happen. Those questions, obviously still remain around how a student develops those skills. But they're working remotely and doing what they can from what I understand at this point.
Anybody else have a question? Laura?
I wanted to say that I heard some feedback that the schedule this week was going pretty smoothly for the high school, and I was really proud of that.
Great, that is good. With my one student of experience currently in school, it seems to be going very well for him as well. So I commend the staff for everything that they're doing. And obviously, it shows that Adam and the rest of the SAU, and in particular the high school administration, was well in advance of any potential shutdowns. And I think that's why some of these other schools are behind us, because they waited until the governor said, you got to shut down. So, all right, thank you.
Let me add one thing. I have kids that are in other cities that are in, some of them are very expensive private schools, and what they're doing doesn't compare to anything we're doing here in terms of distance learning. I have a real problem with the, school you pay $55,000 a year for, and they have no idea what distance learning is all about. They give a packet of work, and that's it. No assistance, no anything, no teaching, no instruction, and that's it. So we're way ahead of the game here.
Yeah.
Dave, do you know what I could do with that cost per pupil?
Nice. All right. Is that it, Adam, for you?
It is. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. So that brings us all the way over to the next item, which is committee updates. I know we just got on a bunch of new committees. Are there any previous committee updates that anybody wants to provide? Laura?
Community Council sent out that they may be going online for potential meetings. I'll give them any information, or do I finish them here?
That's a good question. I think it transfers at this point, or is it, yeah, I think right now. So,
okay.
Yeah, you can do that.
But they may have online meetings, so that may continue, which is good.
Okay, great. Anybody else for the committee?
Yeah, Pim, the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee is going to be meeting virtually as well this Thursday. So hopefully everybody got their meeting invites. So the good news is Amherst's budget passed, so that they now do have the funds to complete their facility study. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that as well as our next steps going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amy. I wanted to bring that up as well, because without passing that, the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee would have a very short charter. Okay, anybody else? Oh, seeing nobody. All right, thank you. We'll move on to Community Council update finally. Delaney, are you still available?
Yeah, I'm still here. I couldn't hear exactly what Laura was saying, but I believe she covered everything that I needed to say. As an executive board, we met today, and we're meeting again Thursday to figure out the details, but we should be meeting on Zoom or somewhere online with as much of council as we can, sometime starting next week, I believe. But that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Next, on to the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Anyone?
I can't vote on it though.
Well, why not?
But I wasn't here.
You can, no, see, that's a fallacy. You can vote if you want to. If you read through them and you agree with everything you've read, that's fine. So that's, is that correct, Steve? You don't necessarily have to abstain if you weren't present for a meeting.
That's what all the attorneys say.
Okay.
Is that, Steve, can I ask, is that true for me being a new board member, not even part of the minutes?
You have a right to vote. You can choose to abstain. Nothing forces you to, but you shouldn't feel compelled if the consent agenda has a lot of stuff on it. You shouldn't hang off just because of one thing.
Okay.
Right, so need a motion to move the consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dave Chen. Does anybody need to pull any minutes before we approve? No? Okay. Roll call to approve. Dave?
You roll call?
Oh, yeah, because everyone's online.
Oh, that's right. Okay, you're right. I abstain.
Okay. Laura?
Amy, yes.
Amy?
Stacy, yes.
Stephanie?
Stephanie, yes.
Steve?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Bronstra, yes. So 6 yes and 1 abstention. Okay, moving right along. First reading of policies JLCJ and JFABD. Everyone's had an opportunity, hopefully, to look through those. If anybody have any questions or concerns, we can direct towards our new policy committee member. Nothing? Okay, and then we'll move that on to second does that get done at the SAU board level?
Yeah, so because you're passed it along as your first reading, it'll be in the consent agenda next month to be approved and enacted.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that gets us through that item. We're on to teacher renewals. An update on that.
Yeah, so we need to go into non-public for that, Mr. Chair, and then that'll be the end of our business for the evening. Did you want to have a public comment? I don't know if you have any public there.
We have no public presence.
Okay.
However, I don't know if anybody has been texting online or sending messages online to you.
It does look like we have 3 attendees.
Yeah, there were more attendees at one point. One person asked, can the next meeting agenda be to review the process for a new principal in the future? That was during the principal hiring discussion, and that's the only question we received.
Okay. I have a few things that I just want to say as a newly elected chair. First of all, I want to congratulate Stephanie and Amy for their getting their seats on the board. So congratulations there. I don't need to congratulate myself because it was. Also, you know, as we're all living, right? We're living and currently trying to operate in unprecedented times. So I'm going to implore to the board that, you know, we all keep that in mind, and we really, when looking at everything that's before us, we have two choices, right? We can work together, choose to work together, or we can choose not to work together. I prefer to choose to work together, and I hope that all of you do as well. You know, my role as the chair is really to be the facilitator of these meetings. Okay, so I'm going to lean on all of the other board members to come up with questions and you know, look into, do the research that requires them to satisfy their answers or to bring meaningful discussion to the board. Differing opinions are always good. You know, that helps us, you know, really go after some of our areas that issues that we want to try to get better, make better, and, you know, find better solutions, drive towards better solutions. But everybody needs to be on that same wavelength so we can work together to achieve that. Looking around, I think just Amy and Steve and myself were on the board, or various boards at that time, when we did an exercise with our previous superintendent about getting to yes. That was powerful, and I think that's something that we kind of have to look back on, not that exercise in particular, but just the concept, getting to yes as a board, right? I understand, I don't want to rehash anything, but I understand, Dave, and your issues with the principal search and all of that, but as Adam pointed out, gee, wouldn't it have been nice if we would have elected or approved a 7-0 versus 6-01 or 6-10, I should say. What else? You know, also, yeah. So a reminder to myself and everybody else, we really want to minimize, if not completely eliminate, any personal agendas. Right? Each member of our board, you know, is very passionate about certain things. I love the passion, and we need that passion to drive better solutions, but it shouldn't come at the, you know, I guess, I can't think of the right word, but at the peril, the extreme word, of, you know, attacking, personal attacks, right? Let's work together to drive to good solutions. And, you know, there's certain things, and I think one of the things that we just talked about, and Dave, you asked Adam directly, you know, about mastery learning, that are not going to change, right? So that's something that, you know, we're driving towards as an SAU to implement within the different school districts. What things that we can affect change of our grading system, right? We understand, everybody understands there's issues with that. So let's concentrate on those things that we can affect and not worry about the things, not worry as much, I should say, about the things that are part of the strategic direction of the SAU and the high school in particular. I think those are the main points I wanted to get out. The one thing as a separate item that we haven't really been good at in general over the years is keeping track of action items. I know, Dave, for example, you'd be like, whatever happened with this? Whatever happened with that? So I think we really need to do a better job at that. And my thought was, and it didn't matter who was in this position when I first thought of it. So Stephanie, please, if you don't feel that this falls under you, feel free to speak up. But I would like the secretary, whoever is in that position going forward, also to work with the superintendent's office, or maybe through me, to get all of the action items and to start to track them, so we can look at them on a meeting by meeting basis and understand, maybe some things we know we're not going to get updates for a couple months. That's okay. But we need to keep up with regular tracking, because many times in the past we've lost visibility of those actions, and all of a sudden it'd be like, whatever happened to such and such?
Yeah.
A year goes by and we've forgotten about it because we're all busy, right? Everybody's got lots of stuff on their plates. So.
Okay, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, right. Those are the main things that I want to get on. So hopefully everyone's cool with that. If you have any issues with any of that, feel free to contact me. I think, with the exception of Stephanie, and I will get your phone number so we can add you to the text list. If anybody else has my phone number, so you can text me at any point and or email me at any point. So, okay. And with that, I will entertain a motion to go into non-public.
Motion.
Okay, Laura, make a second.
Second.
Second by Dave and Stephanie. Take your pick. All right. Roll call. Stephanie.
Yes.
Amy.
Tracy, yes.
Steve.
Often, yes.
George.
Yes.
Laura.
Taylor, yes.
Dave.
Yes.
And Gronster, yes. Okay, the regular meeting is adjourned. We are.
All right, just give me a minute. I need to shut down.